corridors of mirrors. Have you ever experimented with mirrors? If not, better keep it that way, especially if your nerves ain't exactly steel, strong, and you ain't well versed in all things mystical. Me, being the foolish youth I was, decided to try it once. Did everything as instructed. Found 3 big mirrors, a bunch of candles, and some other stuff. Can't remember what exactly. The whole thing was called a soul trap, or so it seemed from what I read. The manual didn't specify whose souls or what kind of trap. But I didn't care, being a clueless young idiot. Home alone. Waited until just past midnight. Set up all these things around me. Lit the candles. And then I stared into my own reflection's eyes. What did Nietzsche say? If you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. Well, it seemed like some harsh truth. At first, nothing unusual. Just my reflection, the surroundings, the mirrors not obstructed by anything, and the candle flames burning steadily. Then the rest of the room slowly melted away, and I lost track of where I was and how much time had passed because even the wall clock stopped ticking. I sat there, gazing into the features of my face, into my eyes, just caught the moment when the candle flames danced, as if blown by the wind, in a closed room, mind you, where there's no draft. Then a slight chill emanated from the mirrors, and a cool breeze seemed to swirl around this whole setup. I sat there, staring, but soon regretted ever starting this. Couldn't get up, even though my body felt fine, and nothing seemed to be taken away. Just couldn't tear my eyes away from the central mirror. Now, my reflection was staring back at me, and damn, it wasn't me anymore. I don't know what optical wonders were at play, but the mirror me had very little in common with myself. I felt like just beyond those few measly millimeters of glass separating us, a wicked demon lurked, mocking me by taking on my form, a demon from far-off realms, where a sane person wouldn't tread, because there are easier ways to end yourself. And this demon, gradually, first subtly, then more clearly and brazenly, settled into the new image and started smirking at me, and I was no longer amused. I couldn't even turn away. It felt like someone had my head in steel hands, could only slightly shift my gaze away from the central axis. Darn it. I shouldn't have done this. In the neighboring mirrors, reflections of figures that vaguely resembled me were flickering, and I suddenly realized I had gone too far. No sound around me. My heart, supposed to be leaping from fear, was beating as if reluctantly, and my breathing, which should have become fast and erratic, I barely felt, as if breathing once every 10 breaths. It felt like this whole setup was draining the life out of me. Drop by drop. I could barely make my body breathe, while my reflections seemed to gain strength, becoming more real, and in the mirrors behind them, faint gray glints flickered, shadows of some twisted figures, less repulsive than this trio that was recently just my reflection in those ridiculous mirrors. I don't know how it would have ended if a dog outside hadn't suddenly howled. Not just howled, but wailed, like howling only from the wildest animalistic terror. All I could manage was to push the central mirror. It was a feeble shove. Probably wouldn't even kill a mosquito. But it was enough. Thankfully, the mirrors were only supported by thin little rods. I'll never forget that inhuman, monstrous face with twisted features, glaring at me with hatred as the mirror slowly fell to the floor. A crash, shards. I snapped out of it and felt completely drained, almost passing out, as if from a severe beating. Only one thought pulsed in my mind. How am I going to explain the shattered mirror to my parents? Many years have passed since then, and I've actively tried to forget this story. But even now, I avoid lingering near mirrors without good reason. The killer's mirrors. A friend of mine told me this eerie story, and now I'll share it on his behalf. Back when I was in school, we were sent to a neighboring city for sports competitions with another school. We were accommodated in the dormitory of the local institute. On the last evening before heading home, we bought some beer and decided to have a bit of fun in the room. After drinking a bit, we started goofing around, throwing pillows at each other, pushing, playfully wrestling, and having a good time. One guy got thrown towards the wall and hit it quite hard. A moment later, we heard a knock from behind the wall. We thought, what if there are girls over there, and started playfully knocking back. To our surprise, each of our knocks received a response from the other side. Being tipsy teenagers, we decided to spook the girls. We grabbed 2 flashlights, wrapped ourselves in sheets, and went to the neighboring room to pretend to be ghosts. To our amazement, we saw a padlock on the door of that room. We went to the guard and told them what happened. While we narrated the story, the woman turned pale, averted her gaze, and when she caught a whiff of beer from us, she scolded us and sent us back to our room. The knocking from the wall didn't happen again. The next morning, before leaving, we asked a student in the corridor about the mysterious room. Luckily, he happened to be a 5th-year student, familiar with the history of the dormitory. He told us that 3 years earlier, 2 girls had moved into that room. They lived well until they decided that there weren't enough mirrors in their room. Each of the girls hung a large mirror above her bed, as you might guess. The beds were facing each other, and consequently, the mirrors too. Students visiting the girls often admired the endless corridor of reflections. The girls themselves enjoyed it. The mystery, the atmosphere, and then they started losing weight and withering away, as if they were on a diet. In classes, the girls looked lethargic, with dark circles under their eyes, as if they weren't getting enough sleep at night. At that time, no one paid attention. Typical student life, parties, who knows what else. Then the girls stopped attending classes altogether. The door to their room was locked from the inside. The concerned dormitory supervisor, having a duplicate key, decided to check the room. Both girls were in the room. They hanged themselves side by side in the center of the room, reflecting in both mirrors. Witnesses claimed that the mirrored corridor displayed an endless array of lifeless bodies. They had never seen anything more horrifying in their lives. After this dreadful incident, no one volunteered to live in the room where the girls perished, and it remained uninhabited. Students speculated that the mirrors were to blame, draining the souls from the girls. However, nothing was removed from the room, and to this day, the 2 mirrors still face each other. The Soul Trap, a mystical tale from real life. Back when I was 7, just a little tyke, I can still vividly recall the events tied to the passing of my great-grandma. They called her Granny Gallia, and she lived a long life. At the time of her departure, she was pushing 90. Maybe it was her genetics that played a role in her longevity, or perhaps it was because she was a healer, tending not only to those seeking her aid, but also to herself. She wasn't one to frequent hospitals, preferring to mend herself with herbal brews and concoctions. But time is ruthless and makes no exceptions. Granny Gallia's life was nearing its end. When she took to her bed, everyone understood she wouldn't rise again, and preparations for the funeral began quietly. Us, kids, were rarely brought to her, but for some reason, I was taken to bid her farewell that time. I still remember her room. Heavy curtains, flowery wallpaper, a dresser, and a vanity. On the other side, against the wall, stood a massive old wardrobe with mirrors on both doors. Mom tidied up her room. Aunt gave her injections. And there I was, lying next to them, just being a dumb 7-year-old dude. Grandma mostly remained silent, breathing heavily. Then, as if awakening, she said, "It's better for all of you to cover the mirrors when I'm gone. Or, God forbid, I'll be eternally watching over you from there. No peace at all." Her words rang out crystal clear and etched into my consciousness. Maybe it was because I tried to make sense of it, vividly picturing Grandma crawling into the mirror and peering out. Mom and Aunt paid little attention to her words and continued talking about whatever they were discussing. Less than a week later, Granny Gallia passed away. In the hustle, everyone forgot about the mirrors and her warning. On the night before the funeral, my mom and 2 other aunts stayed overnight at Granny's apartment. I was brought along because there was no one to leave me with. Granny lay on her bed in her room, covered with a simple sheet. I, a clueless kid, understood what happened, but didn't grasp the tragedy of it. All, just everything. As I walked past Granny Gallia's room, curiosity got the better of me. And there it happened. In the moment, I cracked the door open. Something bright, translucent like ball lightning, shot from the wall to the wardrobe and vanished into the mirror. I got incredibly scared and screamed my lungs out. Of course, everyone rushed to me. But no matter how hard I tried to explain what I saw, no one understood me. They all chalked it up to my stress from everything that was happening. No one believed me. Maybe, over time, even I would stop believing it myself, if not for what happened next. They buried Granny Gallia, and Mom and I lived in her apartment for some time. One day, my aunt came over with her younger daughter, around 4 years old, and one evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard my cousin's voice coming from Granny's bedroom. It was lively, as if she were playing with someone. I walked in, and there she was, sitting in front of the mirror, smiling, talking, and showing something to the reflection. I approached her and asked, "Are you talking to someone?" She pointed at the reflective surface and said, "We're playing with Granny Gallia. She hides here now. I was too scared to even glance at the mirror." I grabbed my cousin's hand and led her out, shutting the door tightly. I never entered that room again. Unexplainable dread would grip me when I even approached the door. What happened next? The apartment was sold. The new tenants tossed out the old furniture. Most likely, Granny's wardrobe mirrors were destroyed. Did it help her soul? I don't know. Maybe it set her free, or maybe not. But I've remembered for life. When someone leaves, cover your mirrors.